Saturday morning, time to kick off the Experts program. That means that Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, is joining us for this Super Bowl weekend. Good morning, Luis.
Good morning, Mark. How are you? Are you excited about the game?
Absolutely. You know, ever since I was a little kid, I like Kansas City Chiefs. And only because one Christmas, I got a helmet, some pads and so forth, and it was a solid red helmet. When I looked through, like, all the NFL teams that I could possibly emulate, the only one that it matched up with was the Chiefs. And so I said, okay, well then some kids have Packer helmets, other kids had Raiders and 49er helmets. I'll have a Chiefs helmet. And back in those days, for 50 cents, you could send off through an ad in the back of Boys Life magazine, NFL helmet decals. So for 50 cents, I got a couple of Chief arrowheads and I put them on the helmet. That was my deal, my Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, that's funny. Well, good for you.
I don't ever recall seeing a Dolphins helmet in San Jose, California in the early 1970s.
No, probably they weren't the most popular team on the West Coast at that time.
But I would imagine growing up, like when you were a kid in Miami, going around to different stores and so forth, they had a lot of Dolphins paraphernalia.
Oh, tons. I mean, it was all over the place. And, you know, it was at the time really the only sports team that we had. You know, now we have basketball and we even have ice hockey.
Right.
But when I was growing up, there was just the Dolphins and nothing else.
Right.
And, you know, my Hurricanes and on the college side, but everything was all Dolphins paraphernalia, Dolphin gear, Dolphin everything, pillowcases, pajamas, you name it.
So I got to ask you about that. Down there in Miami at the southern end of the state, you had the Dolphins and you had the University of Miami, although the Hurricanes really hadn't become a big thing. They didn't really hit till like the 80s when Howard Schnellenberger was there. How big were Florida State and the University of Florida at that end of the state as far as football?
Not very big, quite frankly. I mean, Florida, back in those days, the Florida State and Miami played every year. Mm-hmm. So there was this big rivalry north and south. And so in Miami and South Florida, it wasn't so much about Florida State. It's about disliking Florida State.
Okay.
And they also largely recruited from within the state. So the players themselves, this was before it became kind of a national recruiting campaign, basically we're dividing up all the best players coming out of high school between these three colleges. And so there was a big rivalry. You know, we didn't play Florida very much, but we sure played Florida State every year that I can remember.
Okay. And those other two schools were in the northern part of the state, right? Up in Gainesville and Tallahassee?
And Tampa.
Oh, so Florida State is in Tampa?
No, Florida State is in Tallahassee. You're right.
Okay. So Tallahassee Tallahassee and Gainesville, which are in the northern part of the state.
Yep.
And at that time, the much more rural part of Florida.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing. You go to Florida now, back when I was growing up, it was nothing like it is today.
Kind of a different place, right? I mean, it was like the south end of Florida where Miami was a little more cosmopolitan than the rest of the state, which was pretty rural and pretty redneck.
Yeah, it was pretty much, you know, you had South Florida and then pretty, you know, if you drove north of Fort Lauderdale, there was no significant civilization until you got to Tampa or Orlando.
Right. So you were basically in southern Georgia from,
exactly.
As I've heard people refer to it back in the old days.
Yep.
They called it southern Georgia. Hey, let's talk a little bit of Super Bowl here because we've got, speaking of Tampa, we've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And Super Bowl 55, it won't be broadcast in 4K, but it's going to have 4K and 8K capable cameras. So what's going to be the value of that if it's not going to be broadcast in 4K? What are they doing?
So the reason they're not broadcasting it in 4K, by the way, is because last year when Fox did it, Fox had done a number of other sports events in 4K, so they had a lot of experience. Unfortunately, CBS has not, so they decided not to even try. But the cameras that are 4K and 8K can be used for some of those special effects that you see when they do replays, where you see like the 360-degree player. Mm-hmm. You see them catch the ball and they freeze them in kind of midair and they swing around and you see all the players around them. That's all done by computers using these high-speed 4K and 8K cameras. So they're still doing it and they're still going to record it in 4K for, you know, broadcast later on, you know, probably stream streaming. But there's still going to be plenty of action. They're going to be using all of these awesome cameras, the ones that seem like they fly across the field from above. We're probably going to see more cameras in this Super Bowl broadcast than ever before. So nothing will be lost. You know how sometimes when you have a replay and you're like, oh, they don't have the angle, you can't really tell. I don't think that'll be the case in this game. They're going to be using as much of this video technology as possible, and you'll be able to actually watch it, not just on cable. Obviously broadcast, CBS will be broadcasting it if you're using an HD antenna, but there's going to be a lot of streaming options, including the NFL app, which will be streaming it free of charge, as well as, the CBS Sports app and all sorts of radio options. If Sirius is going to be doing it and stuff. So there, you will have a plethora of ways to watch and listen to the game on Sunday.
Wow. So if someone is going to, say, watch this on a mobile device, maybe stream it onto their high-def TV, will all of these 4K and 8K cameras make any difference on on an online stream as opposed to a broadcast over-the-air, thing?
Well, yeah. So the streaming will actually have better quality, if you can believe it, than the traditional cable. It won't be 4K, but it'll be the stream can actually compress the data better than the cable can broadcast it through their traditional cable outlets. So you might even get a better experience if you stream it. Instead of using your cable box, call the app up on your big screen TV or on your Fire Stick and watch it that way, and you might get a better experience.
Hey, we use Comcast here at home, and I noticed that on a number of channels, you have two different places you can watch the same program, right? So, like, take, for example, KION TV or KSBW TV. You'll see them down at, like, Channel 5 and Channel 6 on the cable, but then they're up at, like, 705 and 706. And up in the 700s, it's like an HD presentation that fills your entire screen. If you're down at 5 and 6, it's a smaller presentation that doesn't fill the entire screen. What's the difference between the two, and why does that happen?
Well, so the single digit channels are really the standard definition resolution. That's the old type of tube TVs before high def TVs came. And there's still people that have those. So they have to provide some sort of option for them to be able to watch TV. So that's what those channels are for. But when you get into the high def channels for those same stations, they're up in the 700s. And if you have a modern box, a newer version of the Xfinity or Spectrum box, it will automatically detect that you have an HD TV. And if you go to 5, for example, it'll automatically send you to 705 so that you don't get that experience. Now, if you have an older cable box, it won't do that. So if you're not having that experience and you have to manually change it, then you might want to upgrade your cable box. It's free.
Okay. Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, joining us today as we talk, technology and the Super Bowl. And they're one and the same these days. And we'll be watching the game tomorrow afternoon starting at 3:30 and see how they're going to use technology. Online, it's alvareztg.com. At AlvarezTG is the Twitter handle. And Luis, the toll-free number for the I-Team.
Give us a call at 866-78-I-Team. That's 866-784-8326.